సభకు నమస్కారం. నేను తెలుగులో మాట్లాడడానికి కొంచెం ఇబ్బంది ఉంది, దానికే ఇంగ్లీష్లో మాట్లాడుతాను. Respected guests and others over here, today I will be speaking about literary translations and why it is important. Before talking about the literary translations, I would like to talk about why it is important to have this session in Osmania University. It has an historical significance. Osmania University is a classic experiment in the history of Indian education. You all know that the universities began in India in mid-19th century, mainly in three places, one in Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. And then later, Mysore University began functioning. So that was the first university outside the British province. The first university started by a Indian prince. But Mysore University, the medium of instruction was English. And then MS University began. It was also medium of instruction was English. Osmania University was the first university which also began in the second decade of the 20th century. The medium of instruction was Urdu. The first university and most probably the last university to give education in an Indian language. Today we are talking about giving education in Indian languages in new NEP, National Education Policy, but Osmania University was that kind of experiment. There was a translation bureau attached to the university which used to translate all kinds of books into Urdu from all languages. Medicine, engineering, everything was taught in Urdu. If you happen to meet a old doctor in the city, they would have studied in Urdu medium. But unfortunately, once the Telugu regions united and United Andhra came up, Telugu did not become the medium of instruction, nor Urdu was continued. We shifted to English. It has a lesson to us. I will not get into that in detail. But what I was trying to say is that this is an experiment which we can say in Indian language, na bhuto na bhavishyati, that kind of thing. Of course, this kind of experiment is being done in other countries like Korea, Japan. Everything is taught in those languages there, and translation plays a major role in those countries. But unfortunately in India, today we have accepted English, so much so that even in primary schools, we want our students, our children to study in English medium today. But it also has an advantage. So because we are studying English, it has become a kind of window to the world. So through English, we are trying to get to know what are the things that are happening in the world. It's a good thing, but it's also a problematic thing, because English will act as a gatekeeper of knowledge to us. If some research has happened in Korean language, we will not get it into Indian languages unless it gets translated from Korean language into English. So if the Anglo-American academia translates certain text from Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese into English, then only we will come to know about it, then we translate from it. Otherwise, if they don't put their stamp, the Anglo-American word, on these literatures or on this knowledge, we will not come to know about it. So this is the problem. So unless we have a direct translations from Korean into Telugu, Japanese into Telugu, and similarly from these languages into other languages. But unfortunately or fortunately, English is acting as a mediator and a gatekeeper of both knowledge and literature. This is one main point. And the second point is that literary translations are not new to us. It did not come to us through English. Always the history of translation, if you look at the history of translation, it goes back to the history of languages itself. So if there are more than one language, then translation is the only way through which we can communicate between two languages. So in that sense, the history of translation goes back to history of languages. And if you look at it, even the Indian context, most of the literary traditions began with translations. You take any language for that example, and it is generally said that a golden period in literature in any language is preceded by a golden period in translation. If Shakespeare was there in English literature, the credit should go to the translators who worked in the previous generation, because there were translations of sonnets from Italian into English. Shakespeare could take up that Petrarchian sonnet and experiment with it and modify it and use it in English and come out with what we today call as Shakespearean sonnet. So in that sense, Shakespearean sonnet wouldn't have been there if there were no translations from Italian into English. So in that sense, all golden age in literature is preceded by a golden age in translation. There are people even in Telugu who are worried that no, we are always getting translations into Telugu. Telugu literature is not getting translated into English. Though Telugu literature is goppadi, but we don't have goppa translators. That's why we are not getting Booker Prize or some other award. So we should get it translated into English. But don't worry about it. If there are a lot of translations into Telugu, there will be a golden period of literature in Telugu which is going to follow. So in that sense, you don't have to worry about this flow into Telugu, because automatically this flow will enrich and give a different perspective to Telugu literature too. I am not saying that there is no perspective or right now in Telugu. So in that sense, we should not worry about the translations, but it is important to have a give and take. So in that sense, the give and take among the Indian languages is very vibrant, in spite of the fact that in the last 150-200 years, English is playing a major role. When Aruna told me that they are getting art lamp translated into Telugu, I was shocked, because art lamp is in English and Kannada and Telugu have a vibrant relation. Why should art lamp should come to Telugu? The stories of Banu Mushtaq should come directly from Kannada into Telugu, but he said no, it is coming from directly from Kannada, you don't have to worry. But the word that he used is art lamp.
Yeah.
That's the thing that it triggered me. So somehow the English is still trying to play a major role, and of course what gets translated from Kannada into Telugu and how Booker Prize decides what should get translated is also a issue that we need to think about, but later on. If we get into the history of translations in Indian languages, as I said, all literature began with translations. If you take Kannada for example, one of the first available text in Kannada is Kaviraja Marga, a 10th century text in poetics, but it is modelled on Dandi's Kavya Darsha, a Sanskrit text. So it is modelled on. So there are verses which are direct translations from Sanskrit into Kannada, and then there are modifications to suit the literature that was emerging in Kannada in the end of the first millennium. So in that sense, we start, the first available text in Kannada itself is a translation, and the first literary, quote unquote literary text in Kannada, Pampa Bharata or Adi Purana, are also in a way translations. Pampa Bharata, he explicitly states that it is a translation of Vyasa's Mahabharata. He doesn't use the word translation because the word translation did not exist in Indian languages until 19th century, and even the word Tarjuma came in the Middle Ages. So earlier we did not have a word for translation, but it doesn't mean that there were no translations. We had a vibrant concept called what we today roughly call as commentaries. But in Indian languages, you have multiple words for commentaries, and there is a distinction among these commentaries. So the commentaries could be intralingual translation. A Sanskrit text gets translated into Sanskrit, or it could be interlingual translation, a Sanskrit text getting translated into Kannada or Marathi. If you go into the manuscript center, which is just behind this arts college or behind the police station, and if you go into the manuscript center there, you will find that most of the texts are with satika, that is along with the tika, along with the commentary. And the satika, though it would be a Sanskrit text, the script would be in Telugu, and the commentary on that Telugu and the Sanskrit text will also be in Telugu. So Telugu script in Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is a scriptless language. So whatever the script that was available, they used that script to write the text. So in that sense, most of these translations existed in the form of commentaries. And there are commentaries and commentaries. So it is in a way translation of translations. Because it points out to the important fact that language is always keeps on changing. If I write a text today, in 150 years or 200 years, nobody will be able to understand that language. Today I will not be able to understand Nannaya's text or Tikkanna's text. Why? Because the Telugu is different. The Telugu has changed over a period of time. If I want to read Nannaya, I need modern translation of Nannaya's text in Telugu today. So this is what we, in Kannada also this trend exists. We call it as Vasagannada Anuvada or Gadya Anuvada, because it existed in poetic text, so it comes in prose in a language that is understandable to me today. So in that sense, the translations happen within a language as well as across language. And today we are also seeing translations not only within a language and across language, but also across medium. Today if I say how many of you know about Devdas, all of you might raise your hand. But have you read the Devdas in Bengali or in English or in Telugu translation? No, we have watched Hindi movie or Telugu movie or Telugu movies. In fact, there is no one single movie even in Telugu or in Hindi. So there are multiple translations onto screen of this classic novel from Bengali. So in that sense, the translations always bring in new things into our language. So Kannada literature began with translations. Even Telugu, Mahabharata is also a kind of translation. So always the literary traditions began with translations. We borrow from other languages, and there is nothing to be ashamed of. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to accept that our literary tradition has began with a translation. So some people vociferously say that no, Pampa's Vikramarjuna Vijaya or Pampa Bharata is not a translation. It's a original text. Who said translations are not original text? This concept of original and duplicate, that should disappear completely. Because every act of writing is original. And nobody creates out of what we call as shunya. There will be something from which we all create, either my own experience, or the things that I have heard, or the things that I have read. What do I mean by I? I is nothing but whatever I have read, whatever I have understood. Even my experience has to be interpreted by me. And my own experiences get interpreted differently at different points of time. When I was young, I fought with my brother and I wanted to kill him when that fighting took place. But today, when I remember that, I laugh at it. So the same experience, the way I understood that at that point of time, and the same quarrel with my brother that today I think about, is completely different. So in that sense, when we also keep on changing, language also keeps on changing. And no language can be completely unchangeable unless it is a machine language. So in that sense, all natural languages, human languages are bound to change. That's why we need translations. And it is translations which keep changing the language. Why I was saying that a golden age in literature is always preceded by a golden age in translation, because new concepts, new way of thinking about the world come into our language through translation. It is translators who modify the existing language and enlarge the repertoire of that language to communicate, to create things that did not exist in that language till then. Not just literary translators, even translators of mathematics, translators of nanotechnology, translators of chemistry, they are also bringing in new concepts into your language, so that your language can expand its horizon, its repertoire, to create so many things. If chemistry is not possible today in Indian languages, because we don't have translators in chemistry. That's why I said the experiment that was conducted by Osman University is a shining example. The way the translation bureau worked, today looking at that building of translation bureau that existed here, I feel happy. It is not vibrant at all, because we are happy using English in Osmania University. We are happy using English everywhere now. Okay, coming back to the expansion of the repertoire of the language through translation is a necessary thing. If languages become isolated, if there are no translations from other languages, it gets museumized. It becomes a museum piece. It becomes a quote unquote dead language. Though I don't want to use that metaphor, but there is the metaphor that has been used to say that it's a dead language. And many languages are dying. Why? Because there is no vibrant culture of translation. If I come from a minority language within Telangana, a tribal language, if there are no translations into the tribal language, that language will be used only in communication with my parents. If my parents are not educated. If my parents are educated, then I will be speaking to them in English, because they demand that you speak to me in English. So if you want to keep a language alive, the only way to keep the language alive is to make translations into that language. We always think of translating from those languages into other languages. Why? We are afraid that this language might die, and we need to preserve the knowledge that exists in this language by translating it into English. What we call as documentation. Tribal languages are dying, there is a tribal knowledge there, you go, collect, do field work, and then translate that into English. Then we think that we have saved it, saved the knowledge, but the language itself is going to die unless there are translations into that language. So it has to be a kind of a two-way process. So in that sense, the translators, if a language has more number of translators, then that language is very vibrant. Telugu need not have to worry that there are a lot of translations into Telugu. Today I find that many of the texts from other languages which get translated into Kannada are not getting directly translated from those languages into Kannada, but through Telugu. Because the Karnataka has a long border with Telugu speaking areas from Kolar to Bidar. And in these regions there are bilingual writers, bilingual speakers, and luckily they have taken up the translation job, many of them. And these people are translating between these two languages. But they are not simply translating Telugu text into Kannada. They are translating Bengali text into Kannada. They are translating English text into Kannada through Telugu. It's a quite interesting phenomenon. In fact, when I was trying to look at when was Shakespeare translated into Kannada, It was in 1870s. It came as a form of a stories, not as a play in 1870s. Deputy Chennbasappa, who was working in Dharwad, he translated Shakespeare's story, Nagadavarnu Nagisuva Kate. And when I was trying to look at it, it did not come from English. Before that it was published in Telugu. So I don't know how it came from Telugu to Kannada. And when I was looking at Telugu, then I came to know that it was in Bengali. So the Shakespeare comes to Bengal and from to Telugu and then to Kannada. These trajectories of text, how they move from one language to another, is quite interesting. And if I look at even in the oral tradition, if I go to Bidar, Lingappa Gondal is here, my friend. He introduced us to a retired sub-inspector of police who was in the Bhakti, what we call as Melas, in Tattva Padakara. He could sing in Kannada, Telugu, Marathi, and what we today roughly call as Hindi also. And if you look at some of these poems, I don't know where they came from. They came from Telugu to Kannada, or Kannada to Telugu, or Marathi, or from Hindi. It was the Bhakti traditions, some of these metaphors, images, everybody uses it across languages. How they have travelled in oral form is quite astonishing. Some of the stories that exist in, let's say, Lingayat tradition in Kannada is found in other traditions which have nothing to do with Lingayat tradition. So how do these frameworks, these metaphors, these images travel? Because it is translators, oral or written, they created a kind of common pool in India from which everybody is drawing. And it is translation which can keep India intact. Not any other thing. It is an interesting thing. If you call India as a nation, it is an aberration. Why I am saying it is because in Europe, where nationalism actually began, nations were created on the basis of language. In India, it is not created on the basis of language. India was created through anti-colonial struggles, where comrades from Tamil Nadu, Lala Lajpat Rai from Punjab, and somebody else from Subhash Chandra Bose from Bengal, Gandhi from Gujarat, could converse with each other in English and created it. So it was an anti-colonial struggle where the elites from different parts who were English educated came together and fought a war against the colonial power to create this idea of India. And what should be the language of this nation? So it was the anti-British sentiment which held us together. When the question of language came, we started fighting with each other. Of course, Gandhi was saying that a certain kind of Hindi, Hindavi, should be used as the language of India, but it was not easy. By 1920s, the Congress itself accepted that there should be language-based political units in India. And it became a reality in 1953 for the United Andhra, 1956 for other linguistic states. And if these are linguistic states are there, if we have a federal structure and if we call our India as not simply a nation but a union of India, then what should be the language? We are having the discussion every day. We are seeing the conflict in Mumbai between Marathi versus others. We are seeing the conflict every day in Bangalore, Kannada versus others. So what should be the solution? One language? Should it be English? Should it be Hindi? Should it be Sanskrit? No. None of these things will solve the problem. Again, the solution can come from Europe. Unfortunately, today we are looking towards America, not towards Europe. European Union. Every document in European Union gets translated into all languages of Europe. Though English is dominant in a global world, European Union has refused to accept English as the official language of European Union. It is the translation which is the official language of European Union. Whether we like it or not, whatever our government policies are, it is translation which is keeping India united and alive. And it is translators who are not only keeping India alive, it is translators who are keeping these languages alive. If, as I said earlier, if languages become island, they will not be able to express the changing circumstances in the world. Why a novel like Gandruk becomes important? Because it brings in a fresh perspective. On what? On the present situation. Whether we like it or not, there are multiple worlds in which we live. The Kannada sphere in Karnataka is one, and there is also an English sphere in Karnataka of multinational corporations. What is happening in these multinational corporations? Is it available in Kannada language? Can it be expressed in Kannada language? How do we express this movement of capital across national boundaries, which began roughly from 90s onwards? And what are the structures this movement of capital has created in our context? What is the impact of this movement of capital in our context? And what is the response to this impact of movement of capital? Rajni Kothari, an important social thinker, wrote in 1990s that there is a movement of capital, what we roughly call as globalization, easily across national boundaries. Earlier it was difficult to move capital from one nation to another, because even in India we had restrictions. You should not invest more than 49%. The stake should be with you. Now 100% investment is allowed. In fact, every government, irrespective of their ideological color, will invite and have investors meet. Even in retail sector, 2008-9, there was a big opposition to opening up retail sector. Today, even in retail sector, 100% foreign direct investment is allowed. So what is the impact of these things? How are we responding to it? Rajni Kothari says that going back to our roots, what we call as fundamentalism is also a kind of reaction to this kind of movement of capital. These are all twin processes, movement of capital and fundamentalism. They are not two. Interestingly, in this Gandruk novel, the first half talks about the impact of movement of capitalism, how a boy was born in a coastal Karnataka area but studied in Madanpalli, Rishi Valley School, and then Bangalore, beats Pilani, and then MIT in America, comes back and starts a venture capital enterprise in Bangalore. And what is the impact of it on his own personality? When does he start thinking about what he is doing, why he is doing it? To reflect on it, he moves to Himalayas, away from this capital venture. And again there he encounters people from other walks of life. How encountering people from other walks of life make you reflect on your own life. And then he encounters another important character called Sophia, who come from a different place but worked in UN agency which works with human rights and re-establishing the refugees, first in Afghanistan, then in Syria, then in Burma, and she unravels the case of fundamentalism. And then the capitalist enterprise and the fundamentalist stories interact with each other. And what happens later? The protagonist, who is searching for, critically reflecting on himself, where to go, what to do now, has 4 or 5 options in front of him. Though the novel doesn't clearly say what option he chooses, but again he starts looking at Dhavalagiri. Dhavalagiri has a significance in Jainism, and he is from that background. So what does he suggest? There could be a lot of discussion on that too. So this novel is raising an important concern that is dominating our lives in the last 30 decades. The Siddhartha, the protagonist, is a symptom of this movement of capital. What it can make a one person to achieve the topmost position in a venture capitalist enterprise, and how it can push him from there. How these processes, which are beyond individual, shape individuals' destinies. Can we take back our own destiny? Even to speak about these issues, we need a language. It is our writers who harness our language to speak about new experiences, new processes which bring in. So if Gamruk is getting translated into Telugu, I am not saying Telugu doesn't know how to think about these two twin processes, globalization and fundamentalism. But here is one more perspective that the novel unravels. It adds to your discussion about it. You can accept it, you can contest it, you can modify it, you can develop it. But it adds to your resources to think about that process. That's why the translations are important. We need to learn from each other how we are trying to understand the world. And it is literary translations directly between Indian languages who are keeping this India intact and alive. And most of us who are learning languages in India are not monolinguals. We are bilinguals. In fact, we use different languages in different spheres. A.K. Ramanujan, one of the foremost literary translators in India, a well-known across the globe, said that he speaks Kannada in the street, English in the college, Tamil in kitchen with his mother, and Sanskrit with his father in the first floor. So each language denotes a particular kind of sphere in our life. If I go out, I use Hyderabadi, Dekhni, to speak to a auto driver, speak to the vegetable seller. When I come here, I start with Granthik Telugu, addressing you in the beginning. Then I shift to English. When I speak to Lingappa Gola, Rajay Verma, I slip to Kannada. So we are all multilinguals. Knowingly or unknowingly, we are doing translations. And if you can take it up as a career, then we will be working for our language. Many of your students who are learning Telugu, don't think that translation is beyond you. You can do it. You should take inspiration from people like Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound is an important modernist poet in English. He translated from Chinese without knowing Chinese. In fact, translation is also used as a tool to learn other language. It is not that you know the language, that's why you are translating. By undertaking translation, you will be learning that language. So don't assume that first you should learn the language and then translate. You start translating it. Whether it is worth publishing or not, the publisher will decide. You keep translating, then you will learn that language. So in that sense, literary translations is something which is essential to revitalize our languages. I am using the word revitalize, it doesn't mean that it is not vital enough, it's already vitalized. We need to revitalize because we need to reinvent the language every time. So in that sense, literary translations are very important to keep ourselves active, to our language vibrant and our nation intact. With these words, I would like to conclude.